Hello, everybody, and welcome to another control group guide by me, your friend ViBE. I'm not actually a Protoss player, just a warning, but I am pretty decent at StarCraft. So if you have no idea what you're doing, this will help you. Okay, but if you're really technical, I would say maybe you could probably look at like a top tier pro gamer like Neeb or something, and look at how they control group their stuff, and maybe you like that better. Who knows? It's just a disclaimer for you, okay? I have very much, lots of pride in my Zerg, but when it comes to Protoss and Terran, you know, we're just kind of winging it off of how I play Zerg. Anyways, let's get started, shall we? Okay, hey, check this out. All right, so number one, okay? All my Nexuses are on 5. This is just like hatcheries for Zerg. I have those on 5 as well, but Nexuses are on 5. So it makes it easy to be hitting 5 probe, 5 probe, 5 probe, etc, etc, etc. While I'm in the middle of doing other things, I can make probes all day, and I can also go 5 chrono boost, whatever I want. I only have 5 Nexus, that's it. Like, Nexus is only 5. 4 is now a production hotkey for Protoss. I don't use 4. Damn it, Rudy, I'm in the middle of a YouTube video.
Hi, ViBE is Skytoss, a variant.
I'm gonna skip the alert. I'll come back to it, I promise. I love you, dude. Thank you. The number 4, I do not use that for a control group as Protoss in terms of unit composition. I use number 4 for production, because 5 is not production for Protoss like a hatchery was. Now you gotta get other production facilities. I also don't use the warp gate hotkey, guys. I don't use a warp gate hotkey. I use literally warp gates off of number 4, and I tab through my buildings. The reason why is because W, which is the warp gate hotkey, is actually bound to my natural base. It is bound to my natural. I have not rebound warp gate to anything else because I haven't found a need to. I don't struggle to warp in units. I literally go like this. Let's just say we want to warp in Zealots. I go 4 Z. I hold Shift and then I hold T. 4 Z, hold Shift and T, and I move my mouse around. And this is what it looks like. 4 Z, Shift T. Easy. Easy peasy. Super easy peasy. So, yeah, all my control groups for production stay on 4 all game. That means warp gates, that means robos, that means stargates. Number 4. And then always it tabs through robo and then stargate in that order. Stargate is always last.
Oh, yeah.
So you can understand, you know, if you tab once, you're going to go to robo. If tab twice, you're going to go to stargate. Tab a third time, you're back on the gateways again. Or if let's say you're on robos and you go 5-4, you're back on gateways. If you ever refresh the group, you go back to the beginning of it. Thank you for the sub, Joseph McJoe. Thank you, man. Appreciate it. Now, that's how I macro my production. Okay, that's how I macro my production, guys. Now let's go to my units. All right, Zealots. Let's just say the composition is Zealots only. Okay. Number 1. Easy enough, right? Number 1. Let's say I have a warp prism, okay? I bind the warp prism to 2 things. I bind the warp prism to 2 and also to 6, okay? And this is what I do with the warp prism. If I have it on 2 initially, I could be going 1-2, 1-2, 1-2, really easy peasy. But then let's say I do this, and I'm doing a Zealot all in, and I want to split them out. I could actually go control 2 on this, and I can move my prism, and now I have 1-2 on these, and 6 is now my prism. The reason why I do this is because if the game ends up happening to be a situation where I don't need to control group my other groups of Zealots because my Zealots are running my opponent over, well, I'm not going to need to hockey them. But however, if my opponent's doing a really good job of denying my Zealots and it's making it hard for me to attack him, maybe I want to be able to bounce camera at locations like this when I'm attacking different bases and make my life easier. And then I can even take my prism to a 3rd location and warp in Zealots at a 3rd location, and now I have control groups 1, 2, 3. So I can bounce around my my multi-prong with like something like pure Zealot, for instance. Okay? Now, moving on. Let's say we have Stalkers in my army. Okay? Stalkers go in 1 as well. Okay? Stalkers also go in number 1. But if this is only Zealot Stalker, I will also bind Stalkers by themselves to 2. And the reason why we do this is because if I have my Zealots moving forward and my Stalkers are in the front, I don't want the Stalkers to be in the front. So I can be like, move this way, Stalkers move back. Suddenly they're in the back now. So I go 1 move, 2 move command behind the Zealots, and then as soon as like wait like 2 seconds, and then re-aim move everything again, and suddenly now your stalkers are behind the zealots. Makes your life way easier. So you don't have to be like, you're not that guy that's like trying to be like, oh god, I need to move my stuff, and like, you know, if you're struggling to do that, it just makes your life easy. Same thing with adepts. If I have a diverse army of adept in my army as well, I will do the exact same thing. I will add in adepts and stalkers. Range units always go in 2 if my composition looks something simple as this. If I want to be able to rotate my units around, easy peasy. Okay, that's why I always put it in 2. It makes your life easier because you can rotate. Now if I have sentries in here, same thing again. Sentries will also go from in group 1 and stay in group 2 as well, just in case rotations are needed. It's just as simple as that. There's a lot of range units off the gateway for Protoss, and this is how they all work. Now let's say I have Dark Templars in my army. Dark Templars will either not be control grouped at all, because if they're going to be harassing bases and stuff, I don't want them to be in a control group. I want them to be able to like run around mineral lines and shit like that, you know, do things like that. But if I am going to use them in a control group, I will just add them in to my main control group, and I will not put them in 2. They're fine by themselves in the number 1. Finally, High Templar. I do not ever put High Templar in 1. I will always put High Templar on 3. Okay? High Templar is always on 3. If this unit ever exists, it is number 3. This unit is like the Infestor. It is the king unit. Like if again, you know what I'm talking about if you watch my other video, but I guess I'll explain it again. A king unit, in my opinion, on what it does is it's a unit that if I ever put it in a control group, it never gets replaced. Ever. It always, if the unit exists in the game and I want to use it in a hotkey, it is going to be number 3 always. This is a Templar. This unit is massively important. It needs to be babysat really hard, and it needs its own control group because of situations like, for instance, if you were playing against a bunch of whatever they're called. Like, let's say you're up with against like a bunch of bio, okay? You have a bunch of bio, and you're like over here doing this, and you're going back. You toggle back to your Templar. You want to be able to do something like toggle back to your Templar really fast and move them out like that. Like you want to be able to do whatever you need to do to make your Templar have more of an ability not to get screwed over, essentially. So yeah, I like putting them on 3 always. Now. If I am going to keep my composition on something basic like this, and let's say now I also add in Immortals. Immortals are the exact same thing again as range units. They kind of fit the role of the Stalker and the Adept and things like that. It will go in 1, and it will also go into 2 with the other range units. If I, other than High Templar, if I have a composition that looks like this. Again, it's for the rotation aspect. Same thing about Colossus. Colossus is the exact same. Protoss army compositions are honestly really fucking simple. The reason why is because most Protoss armies are very manageable with a move. Because most Protoss armies have the same move speed on most of their units. Like a lot of Protoss units have similar move speeds to each other. So, like it's all roughly similar. So having just range units be able to fall back behind melee units is great. But also it's nice to have them in the melee group. That way if I'm you know microing multiple things or macroing, I can just move my army around with one go over here, one attack over here, one attack over here. And lastly, okay, this is the last thing. This is the last thing that kind of fits the category of what we're talking about with 1 and 2 on units that are redundant essentially. And here it is. If we have observers, okay? If I want an observer to actively push with my army, what if I'm up against Widow Mines or something? Then I totally will want to have an observer that will push forward with my army. I will put an observer in my group 1 and leave it in group 1, and that's it. It does not matter if it's in group 2. Group 1 is all I put it in. It's fine. It's in my army. It rotates around with my army. However, I will not only use 1 observer. I will also, if I'm playing against something that has like lurkers, if I'm playing against something that's like Widow Mines, if I'm playing against DTs or something cloaked, the Banshees with Stalkers or whatever, I will put an observer on move command on one of my power units, and if I have Colossus, that is a perfect candidate. I will right click an unhotkeyed observer on my Colossus. And now, if I move around, this observer will literally follow my Colossus all day. And the reason why this is important is because if, however, for whatever reason, my observer flies into a fucking Widow Mine with my Zealots and it blows up and dies, I don't lose all of my observers because they're all stacked up like this. Which is what happens if you put them all in the same hotkey. They stack up like this really hard. You don't want that. You don't want all your observers to die. So having an observer follow a unit is amazing. Because now, what you can do is if your observer does die and you have a bank of observers, like let's say like 2 more on top of a Colossus, this observer in the front dies, okay? This observer got shot by a Widow Mine, for instance. It's dead. I can just grab one observer, shift one it into my army, and now I have one more observer again in my army pushing forward. It's like an observer bank that follows you around that does not overcommit itself. It makes your life really easy at using detection. It makes it so that you won't just lose all your detection because you like, oh shit, my observer ran into a missile turret or a spore crawler. It's very nice. It's worth doing. And even if you don't even grab the observer, you'll still gain detection well enough most of the time if you just have it following your unit. It's somewhat reliable. The only thing that's kind of scary is if like, let's say the Colossus is kind of in the back of the army and I'm about to walk into a bunch of lurkers and the observer's in the back a little bit, then maybe that's a little scary. Okay, so anyways, that, guys, is ground armies, okay? That is all versions of ground armies. And then last thing as well is, I guess I skipped this one. If I have Archons, they go in group 1 and they stay in group 1. I don't put Archons in group 2. These things are you always want these things in the front line. There is like literally 0 exceptions to not wanting these things in the front line. Archons are amazing in a front line situation. So I don't mind that they lead the charge. Like, that's totally fine for me. So I don't put, like, I kind of leave them as like the same role as like a Zealot. They just stay in 1 forever. Alright, now we've gone over all those ground units that are important. Now here's another one. If I have Disruptors in my army, and I don't have High Templar, if I'm going for like Stalker Disruptor, I will put Disruptors on 3. Because 3 is essentially my AoE. It's minorly my AoE. I did the same thing with Zerg. I put Banelings on 3 as well if I'm not using Infestors. But 3 is my AoE group until I have Spellcasters like Templar, and then 3 becomes Templar forever. But before I have Templar, if I'm not using them, 3 is Disruptor. However, if I have Templar and Disruptor at the same time, it's a judgment call as to what else I have. If I have air units, it will go to 1. If I have what's it called? If I have like sentries and like a ground army like this, I will replace the entirety of group 2 with a Disruptor because I'm using Templar. So group 1 will just be my entire ground composition, because now, just like the other video we explained, at this stage of the game, if my composition looks like this, it is a later advanced stage of the game. So it is much less important now at this stage to rotate your composition like this. It's much less important to rotate your comp like that, you know what I mean? This is not nearly as important now. Because what's gonna be happening at this stage of the game is you should have a good read on what the hell your opponent's doing. If you ever move like your army like this, let's just do a hypothetical here. If you're ever going in the middle of Fog of War like this, you're walking in the middle of Fog of War and you have no idea where your opponent is, and you're letting all your range units lead as well on top of that, what the hell are you doing? You need to fucking wait, be a little bit more patient, because that is a terrible idea. Usually late game, you'll have like Zealots scouting, you'll have Observers scouting, you'll have some, or Oracle revelating. You'll have some type of an idea as to where the hell your opponent is before you just walk into the middle of a Fog of War. So yeah, at this stage of the game, having the group where you can shift your things around, that kind of disappears. That really is only for like early to mid game, when the game is really like kind of crazy if the one player is being really aggressive. So yeah, Disruptor will be on 2 if I have a pure ground army, because then I want Disruptors to be babysat as well, just like a Templar. If I'm using both of these, I want them both to kind of like be in the back. So I always go 1 attack move first, and then 2, 3 can follow behind. And then whatever situation applies, If I need a Disruptor, I'll launch my Disruptor shot. If I need a Templar, I'll Storm, etc., etc., etc. And that is literally all ground units for Protoss. That is every possible combination of ground units that I can think of for Protoss. There's no other combination. Like if it was like Archon, Charge Lot, Immortal, Templar, it would be the exact same thing. Because I know a lot of people, you know, they might ask me questions like that where they're like, what about Archon, Charge Lot, Immortal? You didn't tell us about this one. Archon, Charge Lot, Immortal would be exactly this. I'm sure you guys can figure it out. Archons, Immortals, and Charge Lots, they go on 1. Observer goes on 1. Another Observer right-clicks on an Immortal. Templars go on 3. My Immortals, whatever Immortals I have, go on 2 by themselves. Because this timing is more of a, this kind of a build is more of a timing type build. So this is definitely going to be early game, and sometimes I might need to move all my Immortals back. And if I do, I can use 2 for that, which makes my life really easy. Or if I need to move 1 Immortal at a time, I can just physically green box it and move it around with my mouse. And then there you go. That's like Charge Lot, Archon, Immortal. In a nutshell. Like I'm sure you guys are getting the trend here. Like it kind of repeats itself. Now, moving on to air armies, okay? So, as soon as air armies come into play, if I use any type of air units, always, an Oracle is another king unit for me. There is no other unit I have found that fits the role like an Oracle does. And an Oracle is always on my 0 key, which I have rebound in the hotkeys to tilde. And if you don't know what tilde is, it is the key to the left of 1. It is the key above tab, under escape. It is that little like swiggly line right here. That's tilde right there. This is always an Oracle. And the reason why this is always an Oracle is because if I open Oracles, I don't like to put it on 2 all the time, because if I go Oracle plus Phoenix or Oracle plus Void Ray, I don't want the Oracles and the Voids to be in the same group, because these units have different move speeds. The Oracle and the Phoenix is the most similar, but like look at the Oracle and the Void Ray. It's fucking ridiculous. Here, get them together and then move them. It's ridiculous how much of a difference it is. The Oracles will just run in and die all the time. Let's do an Oracle and a Tempest. It's once again ridiculous. The Oracle will just run in and die all the time. And now finally let's do an Oracle and a Carrier. Same thing again. An Oracle will just run in and die all the time. It is not a unit that you want to keep in the same control group with everything else, because it will literally suicide every single time. So what happens is if I have it in its own group, because of its awkwardness, it is a unit that is very powerful. It also kind of acts like a spellcaster. It is a spellcaster essentially. Early game, I can use tilde to move it around the map. I can like double tap it if I'm like attacking someone's base. I can be over here macroing my probes. Double tap tilde. I'm on my Oracle. I can do whatever I want. I can stasis ward. I can use my pulsar beam, attack drones, probes, whatever. And you know that'll be that. It always stays on tilde. But late game, like I could totally put it on another control group early game. It's not the worst thing ever. But the reason why I don't is because this unit eventually is always going to end up on tilde. So it's better if I just get used to using it on tilde forever. Like there's no reason not to put it on tilde. And the reason why it's so good on tilde late game is because if it's isolated, it doesn't compromise any of my other units. Also, if I move my other units, it doesn't compromise this unit, as for the reasons we just explained, because of the move speeds that are so different. But now as Protoss, I can use tilde and move. Whenever I hit tilde, I know there's one thing I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be flying around the map with tilde, and I'm going to keep track of that. So, like, if I'm moving my army like this, I can be tilde, move around. Keep my army like this, move my army around. Tilde, move it around. Keep my army like this. Tilde, move it around. I can rotate my control groups easy, and all I'm doing is I'm looking for his army to revelate. And this tilde becomes a revelation control group. That is the main purpose of it. This unit is a active flying scout that literally looks around for the army to tag it repeatedly. So that is also another reason why it is in its own control group, because if you had anything else with it, it would die. Like everything else would just be compromised. You don't want to be exposed like that. One Oracle is, or maybe 2 Oracles are on tilde, and you're just running around trying to revelate shit and find his army. And then you're trying to maintain the tag because it disappears every 30 seconds. So that is how I use Oracle. Oracle's simple. It's always tilde. It never changes. It never gets added into other units. It's always on its own, and that's it. So it's my second king unit for Protoss. Now, Phoenix. Phoenix has 2 control groups. It depends on what my composition is. If I'm going for a ground army plus Phoenix, if I'm going for Adepts in Phoenix, if I'm going for Zealots in Phoenix, if I'm going for anything ground and Phoenix, and we're talking about just Phoenix, that's my only air unit, like I have mass Phoenix, okay? I will put Phoenix on 2 always, because then it'll be like, for me it's like Mutalisk Zergling. Mutas on 2, Lings on 1. Now I have Zealots on 1, Phoenix on 2. So air units always on 2 for me if I have an air unit mixed into my army. And my brunt of my ground army, whatever it is on 1. So that's how I would micro a situation where it's like a hybrid ground to air army. It would always be on 2. However, this is where the Phoenix is a little bit of a tricky unit. The Phoenix will be it'll be on 1 if I do not have this. Okay? If I do not have this army right here, my Phoenix will be on, my Phoenix will shift over to 1, and my air units, my bigger, slower, more consistent air units, like these units all move pretty similar. This is going to change though when the new patch comes out, because a Void Ray is going to basically be fucking this fast. So like we're going to have to deal with the Void Ray in some way. But for now, these units stay together. Like these capital ships plus Void Ray stay together. Same with the mothership. These guys stay together. They all move similar speeds. So these guys would all be on like 2, and my Phoenixes would be on 1. So I could use 1 to like roam around and scout, or not. I don't even necessarily need to scout. I could just have my Phoenix kind of chilling, and I like behind my army, because they can catch up really fast, and I can move my main army on 2 around and attack shit, and then suddenly I can bring the Phoenix in and lift up infestors that are trying to knurl or whatever. I do not put Phoenix in the same army as the rest of SkyToss. It doesn't really flow very well. Now, let's say I have a SkyToss army that is also a ground hybrid mixture, where I have Immortals, I have Archons, I have Templar, etc, etc, etc. What I will do now is I will add all the Archons and all the Immortals into my capital ship group, because again, their move speeds are all somewhat similar. You also want these to be stuck together. You want them to be like close together. You don't want them spreading out. And then I will leave, I would leave Phoenixes on 2, and I would leave Templar on 3. Again, Templar never change off 3. Now, if here's where it gets a little bit different. If my Phoenix all die, and I'm like, Phoenix are shitty now, I don't want to use Phoenix anymore, they're worthless. There are 2 things I will do depending on what I fight. I will shift my entire Death Ball to Group 1, no matter what, whether or not it has Archons, Immortals, whatever, it does not matter what it has. Everything will shift to 1, okay? So 1 is now my Death Ball, if all the Phoenix are dead. And I'm not making Phoenix anymore. Which is totally realistic. You're not going to make Phoenix all game all the time. Sometimes you switch out of them, and it's very realistic. Now, what am I fighting is the question. If I am fighting Broodlords, if I'm fighting Tempest, or I guess, yeah, it's really rare that you're going to see 2 SkyToss players fight each other. But yeah, if I'm fighting like SkyToss opponents, like my opponent is also SkyToss. So Broodlords, enemy SkyToss, and if I'm fighting like Liberators, the thing that all 3 of these things have in common is they can all siege you. Okay, so make sure you guys understand that. Whenever I fight against an enemy composition that has a siege element to it, that is a primary aspect of that army, I will add all of my Tempest onto 2, even though they are still in 1. Because I'm going to use my Tempest to focus fire specifically against his siege. So I will what I will be doing is I will be using my Oracle to like Revelate. And then I will have my army move around like this, 1 go over here, whatever. And then if I want to focus fire while my army is also auto-attacking him, I will not waste shots of my Tempest, and I will pick off key units with my Tempest against siege enemies, against siege-style enemy armies. Now, if I have an army like this, and I'm up against, like, let's say I'm up against Zerg, and Zerg has mass corruptors. He just has like 30 corruptors. I will put Archons on 2. Because now I'm up against somebody who is going to dive my army, and I want to maximize splash damage, and this is how you do it. If corruptors come forward, like this, and they start attacking your unit, the more you make corruptors move, the more likely you're going to splash his army. So what I can do is I can A move my army into him, like 1 A move, and then I can be like 1 move back, like 1 A move and 1 move back. It just gets your volley off on your control group 1. So all your units to shoot initially. And it also, like, what it does is it makes your carriers unload their interceptors. It makes your Tempest shoot a shot off. It makes your Void Rays start shooting whatever. But you can just back up for just a second if you want to stack up the corruptors even harder. And what you can do, or you don't, honestly, you don't even need to back up. That's kind of it's super advanced. It really is. It's trying to like suck them into a little clump, basically, is the point. But all you got to do is you can take your Archons and you can literally walk underneath him. And then when moving your Archons underneath the center of the corruptor, you do not have to move your Sky Toss. Even though if I tell my Sky Toss army to A move, it moves the Archon. But I can physically control the Archons by themselves because the Archon's damage is insanely, ridiculously good against something like Corruptors, which are trying to break my army apart. Which you're going to fight all the fucking time if you go Sky Toss against Zerg. It will happen quite often. Now, on top of that, once again, Templars are in their own control group. So if I just saw a Zerg army coming in here that was like a fucking mass Corruptor army, I would kind of like get my army in a safe position. Number 1, I would move my Archon forward, and I would storm on top of the Archon where the Corruptors are as well. And I would cast a storm, and I would focus fire on the clumps of Corruptors with my Archons. This way my Archons are not hitting stray Corruptors, and they're also not, too far away from the fight or something. And that's how it would go with Archons. Now the last and final piece of this is if this was a pure Skytoss army, okay? If this was a pure Skytoss army, we do not have any Immortals, we do not have any Archons. I would put Void Rays on 2 if I'm not fighting siege units. And the reason why I would do that is because of the similar reason why I would do that with Archons. It would allow me to move just my Void Rays. And the reason why this is important is because if I'm going pure Skytoss, the thing you need to be most afraid of is AoE, especially if you have a Void Ray mix in your army. So the last thing I want to do is just A-move my whole army and have it clumped like this the entire time and never space it out. And suddenly I get fungaled and parasitic bombed and my entire army is just carrier Void Ray. It's like carrier Void Ray mothership. Suddenly all my Void Rays are like... they're just getting shit on by fungal growth, and now Parasitic Bomb just pops all of them in the air, and all my voids die. That would suck. So a great way you can do this, that would make a lot of sense, would be... I'll just do this, actually. I'll just make a few hallucinated Void Rays. A great way to do this would be, I could go, alright, let's A-move my army, and I'm gonna, let's say there's a Zerg over here. I just revelated it, we know Zerg's over there, and I gotta deal with Infestors and Vipers. I can go 1A move, I get close to where he is, I can go 2, move back, and then I can spread out my voids really easy, and then come in and reinforce the back of my army while they're kind of spread out. It makes your engagement way fucking stronger, and it makes it to where you don't just walk into a fucking AoE spell and everything just dies for Protoss. There's too many Protosses out there that do this kind of shit, where they clump it up and they just like walk forward and suddenly one fungal kills the whole army. Because it's just like the perfect setup for Zerg. So that's how it would go for a situation like that. Now, lastly, observers. Once again, I will do the same thing as I did with like the Colossus earlier. If you guys remember, I will put if I have either a Tempest or a Carrier, and that's the main unit I have. Either one of those is a perfect candidate to have an observer following those units. As soon as I have a mothership, though, and the mothership will be the unit now that has observers following it. And if you're someone that always loses your mothership, you don't have to put all your observers on the mothership. You can put like one observer on a carrier and one observer on a mothership. It doesn't really matter that much. But usually what I do is I put my observers on the mothership because I play very cautious with my mothership. If you know, I know I'm up against like Vipers or some shit. And then lastly, every single composition, my warp prism stays on 6. The only time I do not have warp prism on 6 is if I do not have a warp prism, and instead I'm using 6 to be like, I'm using 6 as like a defense group. If like, let's say I'm up against Terran, okay, and the Terran's trying to drop my base, and suddenly I need to be ready for that, and I leave 4 stalkers in my main. Well, those stalkers are going to be on 6, because for me, 6 is always either it's like a filler group for me, and it's usually either a harass defense group, or it is literally a complete opposite of that. It is a harass group to my opponent. It's one of those two things. And most of the time, though, it is usually a defense group if you're in the stage of the game where it's like a split map scenario, in-game type situation, or your opponent's being really aggressive. But yeah. And what else is there? What else did I miss? What other units do I have? It's kind of it. Protoss is more basic than Zerg for me. It's a more basic setup. But yeah, I think that's it, guys. I think I covered all of it. Yeah, man. So that's pretty much my my control group situation. I guess the last thing I can say that I didn't quite cover would be if I let's just say one of the last things is, let's say I have a prism and I'm doing like a Archon drop with a prism. I will leave this on control group 2 while I attack my opponent with this. It is my air unit, essentially, even though Archons are inside of it. This is still my air unit. So if let's just say I'm going like Archon Immortal Charge Lot against Zerg, Prism's on 2, Archon Immortal Charge Lot, the rest of them that are not in the Prism are on 1. Easy peasy. And if I'm doing something like multiple waves of like Blink Stalker or something like that, I might put multiple groups of stalkers on like 1 and 2 and 3. Same thing with DTs. If I'm going to be really annoying with DTs and that's my only form of attacking right now, I might put them on different control groups between 1, 2, 3. Stuff like that. And that's pretty much it. I hope you guys saw, Jason, thank you very much for the raid. I'm going to thank you once again real soon. I just got to wrap up this video really fast. But that's going to do it for me today on the Protoss control group methods that I use. So if you guys don't know what you're doing, and if you want some ideas on how to make your play better, or just try to be more technical with how you use your units, I recommend trying it out. But one more disclaimer: if you just skip to the end of the video and you're like, I don't have time for this shit, I did say at the beginning of this video, I don't think my Protoss control group methods are bad, but you probably can find better if you look at like a top tier Protoss professional gamer. Because I am definitely not a Protoss pro. I'm just kind of basing my Protoss control group methods off of how I play Zerg. But either way, I think it still works pretty well. Hope it helps you guys. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys in another video. And if you're a Terran or a Zerg player out there, check my YouTube for your race if you want to watch your race specifically. I've done this for all 3. And I will see you guys in the next one. Peace. Bye. See ya. Goodbye.